Okay, so recently I decided to get some simple audio listen speakers. These are the really expensive speakers. They're worth like £400 on Amazon. So they're really high quality, top of the range, 2.0 speakers, hi-fi, whatever, etc. And overall, I'm not very impressed with them. TLDR, I rate them about 6 out of 10, maximum. But more on that later. Right now, I'm going to talk about the speakers, about the boxing, and a general review of, the actual physical speakers. Okay, so the speakers themselves are very small. If I compare them to my 21-inch monitor, you can see there where they are actually quite a good height in comparison to my monitor. The actual height is about 20 centimeters by about 11 centimeters. So 20 centimeters high, 11 centimeters across. These are box speakers, so they don't have a different depth. It's 20 by 11 by 11. So they're a good size speaker. As for the actual build of them, aluminium frame, very nice, all metal, plastic tops, fairly easy to scratch and get a lot of dust on, and a very nice fabric that's supposed to help your acoustics in some way. Don't know how. The speakers themselves are actually really, really nicely done in every single way. For example, down here on the many speakers, like in the edges and the corners and that, you can start to see problems where they kind of sort of gave up trying to make the speaker look really nice. But these speakers, even in all the little nuts and crannies and that, are really well beveled, made, etc, etc, etc. And they're definitely built to £400 specifications. Now, as for the actual layout of the speakers, your left hand speaker is a satellite, not your control speaker. Your right hand speaker is actually your control speaker. This speaker contains your inputs, your control panel, and your main back panel. Okay, so for the inputs, you have your headphone input and you have your general line-in input. That's the only two inputs you really have on the front here. The line-in input is not the one that's recommended to be used generally. It's more like a compatibility method for all media devices. The top is what contains your actual control panel. So you have the power on, power off, you have the mute, you have a line-in symbol here, and you have your Bluetooth. And you have your volume control. Everything is done by touch on here. So there's no buttons, it's just touch control. So, ding, ding, As for the back of these speakers, you have your other speaker, your right-hand speaker, your satellite speaker. You have your USB, which is the recommended way to connect these. You have your power, and you have a possibility of a subwoofer out. As for the satellite, it has nothing really on it, apart from the simple audio symbol, logo, and a single wire with a L sign. So you can actually see that this is the left-hand speaker. I haven't got these speakers set up wrong. Your left-hand speaker is actually a satellite speaker. Okay, so that's the general sort of style of these speakers. Overall, really well made, really nicely done. There's no sort of sharp edges, no sort of lowering of quality. I mean, I'll show you even underneath. Look at that. I mean, they even checked the underside of these speakers to make sure that they would be really nice. And the £400 value continues throughout its boxing as well. So as you can see here, this is how it actually came. It came in a very nice box like that. And within that box is yet another box, which separates out. And the very first thing you see is a speaker either side here with a box of wires, your remote control, and some other stuff. I will explain what you see in here. The very first thing that you see within the box is your instruction manual, which is kind of useless, actually. It doesn't really help you that much. Your line in, so you have one line in cable. You have a 3-meter extension cable for your speakers. You have a USB cable for connecting, so you don't need to find your own USB cable. You can use the one that they have. Your power cable, and that's about it, I believe. So I'm just going to have to check the speakers a second to see. Yes, so your USB and your power cable. As for appliances, you have this remote control. And that's pretty much all you have. So the actual accessories with this are very simple, but they're very nicely laid out and they're very clean. And continuing on with the packaging, something that really surprised me was that even the actual, the surrounding fabric around the speakers as I unpackaged them is not like some cheapy plastic crappy stuff. It's actually fabric. I believe it's actually treated cotton. And it's even sewn and everything. Look at that. Not sure if you can see that properly. They are actually sewn sleeves. So the entire packaging, the entire build of these speakers is really nice. It's worth £400, etc., etc., etc. Even their tiny little remote control feels really sturdy. It doesn't bend. It doesn't have any, ability to dent it. I could apply full pressure to that. So overall, the actual build quality is 10 out of 10. But the actual speakers themselves, the actual usage of them, the actual layout, the actual sound is 6 out of 10. Okay, so let's actually talk about that, shall we? And I will talk about my gripes with them, because I've talked about how, the speakers are worth their money, etc. Now I'll talk about their downsides. The first and foremost downside is the fact that your control speaker is on your right-hand side. I'll explain this a little bit. Most controls are on the left-hand side, mainly because the left-hand side is easier to get to than your right-hand side. It's easier to move your keyboard arm than your mouse arm. And it creates less strain. You don't have to constantly change your sitting position in order to do it. So most controls should be on the left-hand side, and anyone who's really used computer speakers will know that the left-hand side is the place to put controls. But unfortunately, they've decided to put the controls on the right-hand side, which, means that I'm not too confident how much of a computer speaker these are. It also, of course, is a bit of a show breaker for me because I don't like to have to constantly change my sitting position. I don't like to have to strain around in order to control the volume and that. You could say that I should be using the remote control, but then you should be asking yourself, why am I using the remote control from about a rule and a half away? Why am I using the control from this distance? I should be able to just reach over and control the volume at the speakers. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point is how these speakers are connected. It's by USB. Now, for those of you who don't know what USB sound is, and for those of you, I must admit, before I had these speakers, I didn't truly know what USB sound actually was. I didn't even know that the USB could do sound. I will readily admit that, even though I am an IT professional, because it's not something that's advertised a lot nowadays. But apparently USB sound is a lot better than normal sound. But there is one massive downfall that breaks these speakers. And that is that when you use USB sound, you no longer use your computer's own internal sound card. You use the speakers. Now, that would be fine if the speaker had full control over its sound capabilities, but it does not. This speaker only has capacity to control its master volume. And even that, it sort of stumbles upon, doesn't do correctly. So these speakers are not very well designed on that front. And USB sound on these speakers is not that good. And I will explain a bit more about that by showing you now my gripes with the control panel. This control panel is useless. They should have put a knob here so that you can control exactly what volume you want. For example, I'll explain to you right now. Why don't you try and get me, a 2.5 volume instead of a 3? You can't on here. You can only get a 2 volume or a 3 volume. You can't get a 2.5. Now, I'll explain to you why I want a 2.5. I live in a house with other people, you see, and they don't want to particularly hear my music late at night. So 2.5 is exactly the right volume to be able to hear my music, but at the same time not to have other people hear my music. Whereas volume 2 is actually too low. My music is too quiet. I can't totally hear it. Now, on my Z4s, I can easily control that by just quickly moving this a little bit. But on here, you can't. The only other way to control it is through your computer, which is, of course, not compatible with Bluetooth connections, because it goes through the computer and, goes around it, goes into the speakers, etc., etc., etc. So what you're doing is, normally when you're using the computer and these speakers together, you're actually finding that you're spending all your time managing both this and your computer's own sound at the same time to try and create just the right volume so you don't get people hitting you in the middle of the night and randomly waking you up, which is a massive downside. Not only that, but these speakers have massive bass. I don't know what it is about 2.0 speaker manufacturers, but they seem to want to pack their speakers with God knows how much bass in order to compensate for the fact that they don't have a subwoofer and all that. It's absolutely useless. I don't know why they do it. I specifically bought 2.0 speakers so that I didn't have that uncontrollable bass, but I've still got it. And it means that the bass is actually so heavy that it actually takes out higher frequency sounds. I will explain this to you right now by showing you, I won't show you this video because at the end of the day, I can't actually get the sound recording on this phone. I've actually tried. But this video here sounds perfectly fine. It's a little Friends video. It's got male and female voices in it of basically Chandler and Rachel and Friends talking to each other. And on my Z4s, it sounds perfectly fine. I can get all the sounds, I can get all the words, etc., etc., etc. But on my simple audio, because the bass and the depth is so heavy, Chandler's voice actually is sometimes muffled by his own depth, basically, which totally nullifies these speakers. It makes them really hard to understand at times. So that's another down point. And, of course, the biggest down point of using the USB power, or the USB sound, and this control panel, etc., 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 is that you cannot control that bass. There is no ability. It's just there. It's on all the time, every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, etc. You have no capacity to control that element of the speaker. You can only control the master volume. Again, as I say, no bass control. Okay, so those are the points. Those points there really make these speakers a 6 out of 10 for me. Maybe even a 5 out of 10, to be honest with you. As for maybe some of the merits of the speakers, apart from the build quality, I can't really think of any, actually. I mean, anything outside the build quality is actually a down point. And if you're looking for some really fashionable speakers, yes, these are the speakers for you. But if you're looking for some speakers that are actually practical, that you can turn the volume up on without waking other people up, that you actually want some real sound quality with, etc., 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 these are not the speakers for you. They're too bassy. They do not have proper volume control. They do not have proper control over its actual own speaker sets, because you use USB power, etc., etc. So yes, 6 out of 10, and that's what I rate these speakers as.